फोकस ऊपर मार हो गया, फोकस ऊपर मार ऊपर मार माइक देख ले, चूज कौन सा है। माइक चूज है ना सही से। ये भी तो है।
ऊपर है ना तो ये स्पीकर
स्पीकर
इसके
चूज अंदर तूने चूज कर लिया था जब तूने सेलेक्ट इसको वो किया था।
क्या इसमें
जब ये बनाया था ना ये मतलब
हाँ,
लोगो
हाँ।
तो उसमें आता है चूज करने के लिए ना।
नहीं कोई ऑप्शन आया सेटिंग में जाओगे
यहाँ नहीं आएगा।
चूज फ्रॉम वीडियो डिवाइस
वो तो फिर अब ये क्या है।
यू डिफॉल्ट ओवरले
मैं बोलता हूँ तब
हाँ,
देखता
हाँ,
यार।
ठीक है ठीक है
नहीं तो क्या है ना वो फिर दोबारा करिए नहीं तो माइक चूज करने के लिए आता है।
Hello, mic check. Hello, mic check. 1, 2, 3. Hello, 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 mic check.
Manik sir, wonderful to meet you. How will this mixture of relation and differences? Never. All. Any other emotion is also accepted. So that no mind between you.
Oh. I would like to have a Chatur channel. I'm very have a group who is performing gospel, performing every day. Rather than have a Chatur channel. The Chatur channel, many of people. तब तक वो आपको चार्ली बना जाएगा नाइस वन बॉम्बे में एक जमाना था जब वॉकिंग की इज्जत क्या जमाना था
Staff of
74 days is not okay. Hey, putting your hand on.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I saw how are you? How much confess? I want that out.
Anil Samir, Supreme Park.
जब खुद बैठो अपने सामने लेके कंडीशन को या फिर उनको एयरफोर्स वाला अभी भी आप कंडीशन देख रहे हो Morning, sir.
Morning, sir. How are you, sir? Thank you, sir. Yeah.
I heard museum and I have to look back.
I did complete.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of VG USA, we welcome you to the 24th annual Major General Samir Sinha Memorial Lecture. The theme for today's lecture is Jointness and Theaterization, Key Challenges and Progress Made. We are indeed grateful to General Anil Chauhan, PVSM, UISM, AVSM, SM, BSM, Chief of Defence Staff, for consenting to address us on a very current and relevant subject. Ladies and gentlemen, the program for the day is displayed on the screen. The session will commence with welcome remarks by the DG USI, followed by the address of the CDS. This will be followed by a question and answer session, after which 5 USI books will be launched by the CDS. Out of these, 3 books have been written by the serving officers who were on research fellowship with USI in 2025 and 26. We will request the authors and the associated people to be on stage for the release of the book. This will be followed by the presentation of USI Memento to the chief guest. The proceedings of the day will conclude with the vote of thanks by Director Center for Strategic Studies and Stimulation. It is requested that the audience to be remain seated till the chief guest moves out of the auditorium. I'll request the August gathering to kindly put your mobile phones on silent. Major General Sinha, Param Vishisht Seva Medal, born in Calcutta on 28 January 1926, was educated at Bishop Westcott's, Namkon, and the Royal Indian Military College, Dehradun. Commissioned into 15 Maratha Light Infantry in 1945, he later joined the Parachute Regiment and served with distinction in the 1947-48 war, where he was wounded at Jangar. He participated in Operation Vijay 1961, raised 6 para, and held several key command and staff appointments, including command of 3 brigades, 19 infantry divisions, and senior roles at Army headquarters. During the 1971 Indo-Pak War, he contributed significantly at Headquarters Eastern Command in Bangladesh. He retired in 1984 as Inspector General, Special Frontier Force, after 40 years of distinguished service. Post-retirement, he served as Director of the United Service Institution of India from 1987 to 1996, overseeing its shift to the present premises. He passed away on 26 January 2002 and is survived by his 2 sons. This year marks his birth centenary. In his honor, a memorial lecture is conducted at USI every year. Now we await the arrival of the chief guest. All are requested to rise on his arrival.
So that is a minor. His father was my Pokemon guy. He's 60 finest seniors I've served. Five of us for
Ladies and gentlemen, the CEO. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, once again. I welcome you all to 21st 4th Major General Samir Sinha Memorial Lecture. The theme for today's lecture is jointness and theaterization, key challenges and progress made, which will be delivered by our chief guest, General Anil Chauhan, Param Vishish Seva Medal, Uttam Yudh Seva Medal, Ati Vishish Seva Medal, Sena Medal, Vishish Seva Medal, Chief of Defence Staff. May I now request DG USI to kindly deliver the welcome address. General Anil Chauhan, Chief of the Defence Staff, Air Chief Marshal A.B. Singh, Chief of Air Staff, senior officers, council members, ladies and gentlemen. It is my proud privilege to welcome all of you for the Major Samir Sinha Memorial Lecture and especially thank the CDS for taking very valuable time out. Literally, he's counting minutes at this particular stage with the number of activities that he's trying to come across the three services to speak to us on a very vital topic. But prior to that,
it's apt to recount General Samir Sinha's contributions sitting in the General Samir Sinha Auditorium in the institution that is built up over here at these premises from scratch. This is also his centennial year. Commissioned in 1945 into the 15th Maratha Light Infantry, he shifted across the Para Regiment shortly thereafter and took part in the 47-48 war, including the Battle of Jhanga. He went on to take part in the 61 war, where, as part of the two paras that were second in charge, he followed up with raising 6 para as the commanding officer. He also had exceptional operational appointments for the rare people who commanded 3 brigades: the 82 Mountain Brigade, the 51 Para Brigade, and the 47 Infantry Brigade. And in the 1971 Indo-Pak War, he was posted in headquarters, Eastern Army Command, where he looked after the civil administration issues concerning Bangladesh. He thereafter reverted back to JLK, where he commanded the famous 19th Infantry Division, and moved on to grooming the next generation, something which would come very handy subsequently. At USI, he was the commandant of the Indian Military Academy, he was the director of military training, and he was also the chief of staff of the Central Command. His last final posting in the army was actually heading the Special Frontier Force for 3 years. Retiring after 40 years of distinguished service, he took up the challenge of building up the USI institution at its current premises. He led the USI for almost 10 years, from November of 87 to June of 96. In that period, the blueprint for the current premises was laid. He oversaw the construction. He oversaw the shifting from Kashmir House into this modern premises, and then handed over the USI in fine settlement shape, in which we still remember him by honoring him with the General Samir Sinha Auditorium and the memorial lecture. He passed away in 2002 and is survived by 2 sons, both army veterans. Brigadier Deepak Sinha, who's here with us today. Thank you, sir, and Mr. Sinha for being here. And Colonel Ashok Sinha, who's also a veteran, but could not join us today. We look forward to the continued engagement of the family and remember General Sinha for his marvelous contributions in building USI, and we continue to follow in those footsteps. It is apt that for someone who led from the front in operations, who saw all the ranges of operations in his military career, then shifted to becoming a soldier scholar and mentoring others, that today we stand at the threshold of another very major change. We've been talking about jointness and theorization, and to speak to us on that, we have no one better than the architect of the last 3.5 years of driving through a consensual change between the 3 forces, looking at every aspect of building up jointness, the same way as the USI has been built up, and building up theaterization, which is around the corner. So without further ado, we now request General Anil Chauhan, Chief of Defence Staff, to kindly enlighten us all with his views on this occasion. So, over to you.
Director General of USI, Vice Admiral SJ Chief of Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal A.P. Singh, Secretary DRDO, Chairman DRDO and Secretary CDRD, Dr. Samir Kamar, former Lieutenant Governor of Andaman and Nicobar, General K.K. Singh, former Chiefs, Air Chiefs, Baduria and Air Chief Marshal Tyagi, former Additional National Security Advisor to Governor distinguished council members of USI, veterans, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to be here at the USI today and to deliver this Samir Sinha Memorial Lecture on jointness and progress towards vaporization. You are aware that USI is one of the oldest think tanks of the country, and its contribution toward development of strategic thought in a country has been immense. It's a repository of knowledge as far as all the defense forces are concerned, as well as the strategic thinking community. A word also on Major Sinha, in whose memories actually we are talking today. Much has been said by existing, but I think uh, Jan Sinha embodied the virtues of intellectual rigor, professional excellence, and unwavering commitment to the national security. To speak in his memory on this talk of this lecture today to this distinguished gathering is indeed a matter of great honor for me. I've been asked to speak about jointness and equalization, the progress towards it. This is one of the major tasks which I entrusted to me when I took over the appointment of CDS. If you look at the allocation of business rules to the government of India, as Secretary DM, it says that one of my last tasks, important tasks is restructuring of military commands for optimal utilization of resources, thus bringing about jointness in operations through establishment of joint oblique integrated theatre commands. So that's a task given to me as Secretary DM. A similar role has been envisaged for the CDS when the CCS approved the creation of the post of CDS. Again, this thing was enshrined into it. So establishment of joint or integrated theatre commands is part of my job as CDS and as Secretary DMA. But largely, as it's been written down in government orders, but largely I retrieved it to as permanent chairman chief of staff. That's a separate. And we had separate kind of a system carry this thing through. It was based on informal discussions first, and they were held under the rubric of Operation Tiranga. And anywhere where we achieved some kind of a consensus, then we took it up formally in the chief of staff committee, took it up as agenda, and then finally passed it. And we submitted our recommendation, two sets of recommendations, rather not three sets of recommendations to already body. So all this was there to achieve these goals of creating theatre commands, and you all know that to achieve any goal in the armed forces, there has to be, you have to strategize about it. There has to be a strategy. You can't do things in one. So, and military and strategy have a close relationship with each other. And you all know that strategy is known as art of war. Yeah? This word was coined for warfare and used for conduct of warfare for a very, very long time. But gradually today this particular word is found usage in statecraft and diplomacy, and today even in the broader definition of strategy would include non-security related matters like business strategy, education strategy, marketing strategy. So to create this data command, we had to actually strategize. And strategy in the simplest terms would mean balancing or interplay between ways, ends, and means. It's an innovative way of planning, that's the ways, to achieve the desired goals, that's the ends, with a finite set of resources at your command, that's your means. So in creation of this integrated data command, if you were to look at the end state, that was creation of data command. The ways were through jointness and integration. And of course, the means were through institutional instruments, narrative frameworks, cultural intervention, and policy mechanisms through which we are driving this whole transformation kind of a process. So I'll talk about all three. I'll talk about the ways, I'll talk about the means, and then I'll talk about the ends as to where we are. So I must have said on a number of occasions that creation of data commands is a three-stage process: jointness leading to integration, and then leading to data commands. When I say so today, it seems quite simple, very very logical, and we should be going this particular path. But actually, when I started, me and my predecessor both made this mistake that we started thinking about the joint data commands first, rather than looking at integration and jointness. We were able to carry out this kind of a course correction, but past 2 years or 2.5 years, we've been focusing on jointness and integration, which has been a very kind of a laborious, unglamorous, time-consuming kind of process. It's tedious and slow, and also does not generate that kind of interest in veterans because of its, as I said, it's a very very slow and which is not visible to very many amount of people. But the basic foundation of a theatre command will rest on this concept of jointness and integration. So let me build upon this, what is jointness and integration and what have we done uh, about all both these two things up till now. So when we talk about jointness, we even have a Hindi name for it, which is Sayuktikaran, which we normally call in a day-to-day parlance now. So jointness is about spirit and bonhomie. It's creating a good working relationship between the three services. It creates an atmosphere of trust so that services can put across their point of view with each other without being without being misquoted or misunderstood. It operates largely in the cognitive domain, and then hence it is slightly difficult to quantify. Well, when you talk about jointness or jointmanship, it's not a new idea. That's been there as part of the founding fathers of I mean, whenever we got independence. So we created this National Defense Academy where all officer cadets went, and uh, this was the basic foundation where this spirit of camaraderie would have been developed at teaching people together, training these people together. But somehow, while the seeds of this were laid correctly over a period of time, gradually, the three services drifted together, officers could hardly interact, and we developed into our own kind of silos. So today, when we talk about jointness, we also talk about a joint culture. That means a culture which is slightly different. We all know that each service has its own culture, developed over a period of time. They're very proud of it, and they have to be. And of course, there's a fourth culture which we're trying to develop, royal culture, which will be part of the meals, and I'll speak about it a bit later. Let me talk about more tangible things of integration, that is AT currents. Jointness may operate in the cognitive domain. Integration operates in the functional plane. So it co-joins two or more different entities, processes, or procedures. A tangible and physical element, the results of which can be easily quantified. Its effects are also visible. Integration in the defense forces combines the unique capabilities of each service through an integrated and synchronized effort in terms of procedures, processes, and structures. So the end state would be that you have a multiplier kind of an effect in which provides you greater value of the sum of the individual particular parts. And this integration we try to attempt in not one, two, three, but eight separate verticals. These are operations and intelligence, capability development, communications and information technology, operational logistics, training, maintenance support, human resources, administration, and legal aspects. Let me illustrate what have we done with a few examples actually. First is communication and IT. We could have created data commands. There was no point creating if they're not able to speak to each other. So we have this now joint communication architecture framework in which we can speak to each other. Apart from that, we have that's a key enabler for integrated operations. We have secure mobile communication somehow, which we actually use during operations scheduling. We have a common cyber security policy, inter-services cryptography system, which we are developing, which will be common to three services. Otherwise, all services will use their own cryptography system and we won't be able to communicate with each other. Fire services emailing solutions and fire services messaging service. Messaging services are all already through. So there are a number of initiatives so that we can communicate with each other through various kinds of media. Without this, creation of data commands, it would have created that, but they would have not been able to function effectively. Second thing is, say, let's talk about say, air defense actually what we have done. Air defense structures were designed by the three services in a standalone kind of a mode. Air Force developed its IACCS, Army Akash Fleet, and the Indian Navy developed this INSAR system. Today, we all know that all air defense systems were actually optimized, all the sensors of these were optimized for aircraft of a particular, all aircraft actually, and then at a particular speed. But today's warfare has shown you the Ukraine war gives us this that large amount of drones which are of a very slow velocity and small cross section. And now the Iranian war has showed us the importance of ballistic missiles. So all is not only requirement of the time that we integrate the air defense systems of all the three services, but also create new systems for counter US and ballistic missiles and integrate them in a holistic kind of manner. Otherwise, if you have disparate systems working in a separate environment, this system will not function at all. Uh, Small green shoots of this means that were visible to us how the US system is able to put in place during Operation Sinha, largely based on procedures and not through physical integration. But before that, we were able to integrate the IACCS with Akash team and the naval systems. And now today, we man these systems 24/7 and not on mobilization. So on the western border, you have all GATC operations 24/7. So this was one. Second thing is, say, let's talk about, say, air operations. So we know say that all three services have some or the other air platforms, but they all work with different kind of a mode. Whatever we develop for them, their procedures, their lexical, even their talking methods, actually, how do you maintain them? So we didn't have a common, say, airspace safety organization. Now we created a common airspace safety organization. We have common standards for testing and evaluation. We share all data related to accidents, etc. This was happening on a standalone basis. The same aircraft operated by the Navy or the Army, the Cheetah, Chetak or airline, suppose it met with the accident, we never shared this data with the air. No, everything is being done. So today we would have had a system in which uh, Air Force Hector would have landed on an army base and nowhere, which even if there was some maintenance to be carried out, it was not possible. No one would have allowed. The procedures didn't allow for. So we've changed all that, and ultimate thing should be that in one helicopter there could be a pilot of the Air Force and Navy flying together, so that they are able to speak the same language. They have the same language standards. So we're putting in place structures like this. I've spoken about counter UAS system. Let me talk about inventory. All three services have a huge inventory. In fact, the smallest of service has the largest inventory. The naval inventory may be about 11 lakhs. There is the Air Force inventory about 7 to 9 lakhs and Army inventory about 5 to 7 lakhs. They don't speak to each other. We do not know who's holding what. So that was another big challenge because we all demanded demand generation, procurement, placement, and consumption. All were having disparate silos, even for equipment which are common to three services. And today, there are larger amount of equipment which is common. So MR SAMs are common, all the rotary efforts are same, your hail and wave UAVs are similar. So this was a big challenge. So now today we have a system in which the inventory is actually on offline mode, can speak to each other by a system known as TLMS. And shortly we'll have a system in which on an online mode we'll be able to see the inventory of each other so that finally we are able to rationalize our buffer stock, rationalize our demands, rationalize the cost of these procurement for maintenance of these assets from various OEMs. To our surprise, all the OEMs are charging us differently for maintaining similar kind of platforms, including HAL. So all these things we can only rectify once there is visibility amongst us as to who is doing what. So this was a huge challenge which we are working, and the government has sanctioned almost about a project worth of 400 crores worth CICD phase 3, which will integrate all the three inventories of the three services. Let me talk about discipline. We can create inter-service organizations, but in the same inter-service organization, if you have officers of three services for the same crime, for the same offense, the punishments would have been different. And the applicability of those punishments on the service carrier would have been different. You can give a sensor to an officer. For Army, it will remain for life. For Air Force, it may be for 2 years or for the next promotion. And for Navy, it's a different standard. So your sensor policy has changed. We have also introduced the Inter-Services Organization Command Control and Discipline Act, in which all the service acts remain relevant, but the commander of this tri-service organization is now empowered to try that officer under that service act. So this act was passed by the parliament, and thereafter to operationalize it, we had to put the rules connected with this in the parliament. That has been done. Finally, we have a budget notification as to which all institutions will be qualifying as inter-service organizations. So that has been done. And finally, those warrants, A1 warrants, that has been issued to those commandants of inter-service organizations. So thing in place. Uh, we have not utilized this as yet, but the structures are in place. Uh, but I don't think this is the end state. Finally, we'll have to work at a Tri Services Act. We have to do away with the Army Act, the Navy Act, and the Air Force Act. And I must also tell you that we have also started working the JAG branch of the Army Generally. So we're trying to work out a common services act. That may take us some amount of time, but finally we will come out with a single act which will be applicable to all. Let's talk about training. You must have heard about large number of joint training institutions which we have created for training with CBI, law, intelligence, music, etc. Uh, these are all functional as part of those training institutes, which I said earlier defined as fire service institutions. In staff college, we have a deep purple division. And all of us, most of us would have done staff college. It's a joint institution which carries out training in three separate verticals. We are CI Army, CI Navy, CI Air Force. They go there, except for some joint lectures and talks, which they say is about 30-40% of the training curriculum. The rest is actually in service specific science. So we created a separate vertical, which is known as the Deep Purple Division. 40 officers, two courses have been done. So from the beginning till the end, they are taught about the joint environment, and this method of instruction is also slightly different. That means all latest services applications which services use, whether it is email, whether it is for operations, whether it is for intelligence. These are the systems taught to them rather than the written work which we used to do in our time. So all these processes are involved in optimizing functions across subjects such as manpower, finance, processes and time. So ultimately, I think that it will lead to some kind of a saving, some kind of an optimization, whether it is time, finance, manpower, or processes or infrastructure. So finally, for this integration, we have about 197 odd initiatives which we have identified on which parallelly work is going on. So you can imagine the scale of this particular integration which we are trying to attempt. So we have already finished some of these initiatives that we classified that which are absolutely essential before creating of this data command. Some can actually continue after that also. So accordingly, work is on. We have, I think, completed about 48 of these tasks, and additional 34 are about to get completed. So integration, I think, was a big challenge. Jointness created that little environment for integration to succeed because maximum differences between the services exist at the functional level, and maximum integration is required at both functional level. It requires maximum motivation also. So that way the what should I say base to towards serialization, and now let me talk about the means which we adopted. Which I said earlier was to institutional instruments, narrative frameworks, and cultural intervention. First is headquarter ideas. Headquarter is the institution which is the engine for reforms. That's fundamental, and that institution has to be strengthened. Unfortunately, we created headquarter ideas, which existed for almost about 26, 27 years, and it was headed by a three-star officer, whereas service chiefs were four-star. So obviously, whatever headquarter ideas wanted to implement also couldn't have got that great and gravitas. So it's not the fault of large number, I mean, large number of system means here in the audience, but the basic thing was to strengthen this particular institution. And today, I must say that it has the desired amount of weight, mandate, and credibility among the people. So that's actually spearheading the reforms. Okay, I could write something, but it is ultimately my basic message which are ushering in this kind of reforms. And today, I may dare say that from some large number of issues, service headquarters looked at headquarter ideas for guidance as to what kind of instructions will they be passing. So, so we have this number of initiatives undertaken by headquarter ideas. It's largely functioning through a number of subcommittees or the chief of staff committees, 13 of them, and something like your uh, joint services communication committee, joint operation logistics committee, principal maintenance officers committee, and shortly for ideas will be the nucleus even for operations vertical as and when we created a joint option or a joint operation control center. So that would be one. So we strengthened this institution of headquarter ideas. That was, I think, fundamental. So otherwise, this reforms would have been possible. The second thing is another thing we'll talk about is narrative or the mood. So each service, I believe, is kind of organized, it's created, which is raised and structured uh, so that it's capable of defending any kind of a challenge or threat in that particular domain. And each service believes that the primacy of this domain, and sometimes they also feel that they're best suited to actually meet any kind of a challenge to the nation. And that's absolutely correct thing to do, and that's how we have this spirit for this particular service. So there's nothing wrong with it. But sometimes this particular spirit becomes a barrier towards integration. So we had in the past, say, Air Force would be articulating the centrality of air power, Navy would make a case for securing of maritime spaces, and Army would emphasize on land and maneuver warfare. Each narrative was valid in isolation, but collectively they reinforced silos rather than convergence. I try to change that. I try to introduce this concept of future warfare as to how warfare will actually unfold in future. And naturally, in the large amount of discussion that happened, finally there was a belief of, amongst all services that future operations will be multi-domain operations. The moment you have this, the future operations will be multi-domain operations, then the centrality of a particular service reduces a bit, and it's easier to accept integration among the so this was attempted through a large number of courses, which we're doing. You're aware that we've done this future warfare course over here, and thereafter we did this run somewhat two seminars, so that today most of the services speak the common language. When we talk at least about future warfare, we say that it's multi-domain, it will be integration between existing traditional domains and new domains of warfare. Uh, so we also now have a joint offering for multi-domain operations, and this was a theme, as I said, in the first run samvad, where the joint offering for MBO was revealed, and finally we had the second run samvad in the subject itself for multi-domain operations. So this I think was important. We changed the narrative so that rather than each service is having a service-specific kind of a narrative, when you talk about future warfare, then naturally it will come to you that future belongs to multi-domain operations. So that helps me break silence. I had spoken about culture, joint culture among the three services. I told you, development of any culture, it's rather difficult, it takes time, uh, and because it has to involve change in behavior patterns. So I try to develop a fourth culture, uh, a culture which will promote original thinking, sharing of knowledge, receptivity to ideas, reducing layers of thought for being innovative, inventive, and imaginative. So for this, as I said, we done this deep purple division in the staff college, similar kind of structure we created in merit, all those institutions which are functioning underneath. I must also say that symbology plays a major role in development of a culture, of a joint culture. So a number of initiatives were taken by us for that symbology part of it. Today you have the air chief, we have the naval ADC. It was unheard of. It's a symbology. The army chief has ADC from a different service. It conveys a powerful message that they're going to be joined. We take part in each other's service days. So that is another. A draft handbook of joint staff is being released, will be distributed shortly. Uh, During the Republic Day, we had this. We have a joint tableau actually, export ideas tableau there, apart from the services. This time we had a tableau on Operation Sindoor, victory through jointness. Today, you must have seen in national dailies whenever there are advertisements for Army or for commissioning for officers. That is also sometimes we put in a joint advertisement rather than services put in there. So these symbologies actually matter quite a bit. And this has also helped create a joint culture among the three services. Next is another base means order, is joint orders and instructions. You are aware that all service chiefs are actually entitled to take out their joint orders. We have an Air Force order, Army order, Naval order, and apart from this, we have Naval, Army, and Air Force instructions. But there is nothing known as joint instructions or joint orders. So it took me some time to convince the Honorable Rashaman saying that there is a need actually if you want integration to issue this, allow me to issue this joint orders and instructions. That power is vested with me now, and we have issued almost about 15 to 20 joint orders. And whenever there's a dichotomy between a service order, this particular order will prevail and not the service specific order. Again, and when I'm issuing these orders, it is not that I don't take into consideration the views of the services. They're circulated over there and then we issue. So, but this is again, this creates a process which it becomes irreversible because you can't take back the joint. Next is joint doctrines and policies. You would be aware that this is a bedrock for promoting joint understanding and some of these war fighting methodologies. So we have taken out joint doctrines on cyberspace operations, amphibious, airborne, heavyborne, multi-domain, space, joint logistics, and joint operations. Making of a joint doctrine is far more challenging than making a single service doctrine because single service doctrine will be approved by the chief of the vice chief. Who are here to take on a joint doctrine has to move on to all the chiefs, vice chiefs, and get a joint doctrine. So, in this, now we're shortly going to have integrated communication architecture, NUMT, man-unmanned teaming, joint asset, joint targeting, near space operations, deployment of attack helicopter, next operations. If you just look at the sheer scale and speed at which is done, it's unimaginable. I just taken account of how many doctrines for the past 30 years that each service put out. I think in an army, 11, Navy would be something similar, slightly more, and Air Force is the same. The number of doctrines which you have worked out, which is far more difficult than taking on a single service doctrine, is almost about 18 in some of them. And this is less the policies which we are working out. I've taken out a number of joint policies, military confirmation policy framework, cyber security policy, weapons policy, lethal and autonomous weapons, and we have artificial intelligence and machine learning. Now that gives a framework and responsibility as to how the services will work on this particular domain. I don't want to land up in a situation after 5 years. Something like a communication and data defense network, everyone is working in a disparate domain. And if you're working on AI, you will have your own LLMs, you will have your own compute, you will have your own data centers, and there will be no coordination of them. So finally, we have to put this thing together. So corrective measures in niche technologies which are still emerging, the application of that is still not fully in place or clear to us. Those basic building blocks are being put in place. Lastly, as far as means is concerned, is awareness. That means, after all, I'm going to reach out to this large body of officers, almost about 60, 70,000, 80,000 officers at every level and tell them as to what we are doing. That has taken me to all military stations, all training establishments, and this particular job of mine has been held by my districts, my CIS, as well as ASDMA as to what are we doing about it. And to a large extent now even the services are involved in spreading this message about jointness and integration. So the scale at which and the speed at which we have attempted this jointness and integration is phenomenal. If we had not done this, even if we had created theatre commands, they wouldn't have succeeded. So that is a message which I want to leave, that a large number of initiatives have been taken, but these are that unglorious, unsung initiatives taken by at every level. Committees of the Chief of Staff Committee, they have done this. It's not my doing. Most of these ideas are offered to me in my talks when I talk to, say, staff college, people will tell me, sir, why don't you do this? Or when you're at CDM, they'll tell me, why don't you do this? These ideas have come from officers from the armed forces, which I get back and try to implement. These ideas have come from the chiefs of subcommittees or the chiefs of staff committee. Most of the ideas are not mine, or my districts put in there. So if the service keepers have told me to let's do this, this will help us in this. So we've been able to kind of generate that kind of a momentum, which will take us through whenever we implement this data command. Now let me talk about the ends. That's the integrated data command. So let me talk about the conceptual issue. That means we all know that when we talk about data commands, we are trying to separate out force generation from force application, and this is one. And then the how will create this number of data commands. There also would be need to create a joint kind of an headquarter to control, not only interact with other instruments of national power and delivery, but also coordinate activities between the data commands and the service headquarters. Because service headquarters will continue to provide that manpower, resource, etc. for the theatre commanders. So this joint headquarter would be important. There has to be clear division of responsibilities between what the service headquarters will do, what the theatre commands will do, and what kind of reforms will be required in organizations slightly higher than chief of staff committee for control during war. So on all these conceptual issues, I'm glad to say that there exists no difference between the three services. It's only on the implementation part, that means on dual responsibilities, need for structure and sequencing of this, that there remains some kind of indifference. But finally, and these were I realized after a period of 3.5 years, that some of the differences were I could have reconciled them even if I spent 6 more months. So finally, I have concluded my discussions on Operation Tiranga. And finally, in spite of the differences remaining, I have concluded my report and I have put in my recommendations and submitted it finally to the Honorable RM. Uh, and finally, in a way, you can say that we all have signed that report, the third report. I've spoken about two reports which I had done earlier with the previous lot of chiefs that had been submitted earlier. This is the third and final report which all chiefs, air chiefs have signed it. So in a way, which says that in spite of the difference remaining, we agree that we proceed forward on this. As time passes, whatever we suggested, it's not the panacea of the final solution for everything. I mean, if you look at what's happening globally, it's huge amount of changes are taking place. And I don't even talk about people who are commanding establishments today. You have in Australia a woman officer from Sinha, she's the chief of army staff. We have the Royal Navy, who's headed by Lieutenant General, an Army General, who's from the Marine Corps. Unheard of that first admiralty of the Navy, Royal Navy, would be a general so and so. Today we had a RAF chief who was not a pilot. He's today the CDS. He was never a pilot. He was with engineering kind of background. These are the kind of changes we are happening globally. Uh, UK has been changing its high defense organization every 5 years. They created this structure, then they went back as to again they've given this operational responsibility to the CDS. So this is not the final thing. Obviously, today with my limited knowledge, my experience, most of my experience was in police. Okay, I work now in a fire service involvement, heading this as appointment of CDS. And with best of my knowledge, we came to a particular solution. But when we have this theatre commands, there will be a lot of jointness amongst them. They will be better informed to take a far better decision after 5 years. What should be the structure? So I don't want to solve all those issues which will occur of problems at this particular moment because at present I feel that your knowledge base or experience is limited. The next set of officers who come who have that wider experience than us, more joint, they probably will be able to create better structures for refinement in this existing structure. I've also said sometimes that theatre commands is a two-stage, three-stage process, joint strength leading to integration, which has explained adequately, and theatre commands as to where we are. But I've also said that's not the end state of theatre command because that will lead to creation of theatre command leads to faster and more reforms in the armed forces. And we are not waiting for creation of theatre command to usher in those reforms. So if there is an expansion of Defence Space Agency, work is already on that. Expansion of DSA plus, which we're talking about, or cyber agency, DCYA plus, or creation of organizations for cognitive warfare. The file is already moved, cleared finance, a defense geospatial agency. That's ultimately, unless we have same targeting data for all of us, this is never about communication data is the most important thing. So work is all for Defense Geospatial Agency and the Defense Communication Agency. Fine. Three services have SONC and equivalent office, but there is a requirement of that. So for work on all these verticals is continuing parallelly. We are also working towards creation of a joint operation center that should come up before by end in May. And of course, that will be a model which we can replicate in Pattaga. We already made a model when the building comes up, underground structure over there. So, a number of options for this are there, and this is being done. The question which sometimes comes is, the importance of patient data commands and the question why now? Why now? Ideally, it could have been created in a situation where there's in a slightly more peaceful state. Today, you can say that Operation Sindoor is still on. Snow Leopard is on. It's not been both these operations have not been officially called up. If you look at the global security situation, the geopolitical situation, if you look at the economic situation, the rapid march of technology, which is changing things faster, and it's overtaking established organization, nation states, decision-making structures, individuals also. Which you wake up, you do not know next day as to what has changed tomorrow. The change is so rapid and so fast. So should we be waiting for some kind of a peaceful environment to emerge and then change this, or continue in the same momentum and change? So my view is that we must change earlier the better, because this increased propensity among nation states to use force, the unstable and global uncertainty and flux which is there demands that we create this structures as soon as possible. Uh, what about Operation Sindoor? We are about to enter the first anniversary of Sindoor. So this was one operation you could say was slightly different from all wars which we have fought now. 4 days operation, but this helped us. It helped us in a number of ways because of the hard work put in for this jointness and integration structure. So this helped us not only, I made a mention of some work, joint communication architecture, air defense, logistics, movement, planning. At least officers were able to speak to each other at every level, at one star and upwards, and most of the time they didn't have to refer back to the vice chief or chief, can we do this for this service? No, this all decisions were taken at the level of one star or two star. That was a very healthy point of Operation Sindoor. I thought I'll make a mention of this. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me close this with a reflection that I believe captures this essence of this whole enterprise which we have attempted. Successful armed forces do not endure because they are powerful and in a single domain. They endure because they were adaptive, integrated, and coherent in the face of complex threats. Indian armed forces have, over 75 years, built extraordinary individual capabilities across three exceptional services. The task before us now to fuse these capabilities into a war-fighting system that is genuinely greater than the sum of its parts. Federalization is that kind of fusion. It's a structural expression of a belief that India's security in the 21st century demands an integrated joint force, not three excellent services operating admirably parallel to each other. The direction is clear, the foundation has been laid brick by brick, and the momentum is irreversible. I am confident that we will see this landmark transformation of defense forces rise in the service of Viksit Bharat in a very early time frame. Thank you and Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your illuminating thoughts with us. The House is now open for question and answer session. May I request DG USI to moderate the discussion, please?
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we keep this crisp, keeping in mind that the CDS is very short period of time available with us. Keep your questions short, introduce yourselves, avoid comments, ask the query. Anurajaman, sir. Mike, please, for Anurajaman.
Thank you, Sanjay. Point here. Thank you for covering what was in our minds like a very wide canvas. And everyone here must be amazed at how much you have achieved during the last few years. I've also noticed that you are one of the few senior military personnel who, in your speeches, often refers to the revolutionary military effect, which I think is a great thing. But my question is this. Surely the summary of all the revolution and military affairs is that the future war, of which you said you conducted a number of seminars already, will be won by that side which succeeds in destroying the enemy's access to the electromagnetic spectrum. In other words, his C4ISR infrastructure, including the satellite downlink terminal. Now, I don't know whether the integrated staff accepts this or not, but if it does, I fail to see any mention of this in any single service doctrine or the existing joint services doctrine or in the Defense Services Vision 2047. Um, if you recognize this, this obviously means I have no arguments with the multi-domain operation, but the kinetic portion must surely be conducted in two distinct, separate phases. I don't find any mention of that in any document. That's my question.
Thank you. Uh, if you look at our service offerings, info warfare, not only in India, there's a bit of a difference between these services and between us and the other countries. But by and large, info warfare has been thought of three subparts: that's cyber, electromagnetic warfare, and perception management. These are three separate verticals which fuse to create information warfare. That's the general doctrine Americans, British, ours, with minor differences. All these three actually demand a separate attention. Cyber is moved on to digital domain, electromagnetic warfare, the spectrum warfare, which was restricted to com and non-com at a small space. Today it's talking about satellite communications and much more. And so is perception management. It's going to the domain of cognitive warfare, molding perceptions. Uh, Finally, in the last combined commanders conference, which was held at Kolkata, which one of the states is a decision taken that there's a need to separate out all these three and treat them all as separate domains. So while this decision finally has been endorsed by the Chief of Staff Committee, that cyber, PM, and perception management. Perception management would now actually include info warfare and cognitive warfare. They all will be treated as separate domains of warfare. And we'll be working towards it. If some official documents may not have found this particular thing because the decision has been taken about 3 or 4 months back, 2 3 months back. We will be working out and include this as a separate domain of warfare and work towards it. I hope that addresses your concern.
Welcome now. Thank you, sir. Inspiring talk, sir. Thank you very much. I'm Lieutenant Anil from NPIDSA. My first question is creation.
One question. Choose which one?
Small. Creation of R&D vertical in defense forces, including in the tri-service organization like CN, Science and Technology Commission and Equipment Development Department. These are small ones, not a replacement for the I can explain later. Second is the need for Defense Aeronautics Commission and review of allocation of business rules. We have 4 or 5 brothers, 5 secretaries in MOD, and there are a lot of delays in actions or cancellation of projects. Is there a time for Defense Commission or review of allocation of business? Thank you.
This particular aeronautical commission, really I won't be able to answer this, whether we work towards it or we working towards it. But this assumption of yours that there are 5 secretaries and they've been working at purpose in the MOD may be highly misplaced. In this particular environment, which exists in the MOD today, all secretaries, I think, are working in quite a bit of harmony and unity, and not at cost profit at all. We have clearly defined roles and responsibilities, work that wherever it interfaces with each other. We speak to each other and try and resolve it. That I don't think is the right thing to talk about.
Yeah,
Tony sir, with you, I don't need an introduction, sir, but I'm Ajay, I retired 3 years ago. I'm not surprised, sir. I'm not anyone to laud someone who's been my DG in military operations, ADJ, and who's been my direct boss, operational boss, when I was the Commander-in-Chief, Andaman Nicobar Command, For the last 9 months of my 24 months tenure, 9 months there was no CDS and 6 months Gen Rawat was sent me there. My question, sir, pertains to the dangers of consensus. What I have seen, sir, what we did together, I attended the last combined commanders conference, the same question I asked you on 30th March in the presence of the RM. Sir, there is some conventional wisdom which has sense. एक म्यान में एक ही तलवार हो सकती है, sir. The army is commanded by an army chief, not a committee of army commanders. The nation is led by a prime minister, not a committee of ministers. This was my exact verdict in front of the Raksha Mantri on 30th March 23. When you showed the slide, my question is, sir, you need that consensus from the three services to appoint the further structures. And we're not talking a fire defense organization. You need the consensus from every bureaucrat who will examine the file. And it is human nature not to seek turf. And you spoke about the three issues on the third report, which have gone up with the issues remaining unresolved. It is human nature to not concede turf. It is human nature to not give more ranks of cabinet secretary equivalent. Whereas when we were there, Admiral Levy is here, we were all part of those initial studies and the iterations and organograms. The two basic decisions which need address. Are we going to have 4-star theater commanders and a 4-star deputy CDS or assist, whatever have you, sir? And what are we going to do with regional commands? Because our select ranks are all repositing there. And if this stabilization is only because the enemy's decision cycle is faster than ours, and we need faster decision cycles and greater accountability, which is what we did in Army Headquarters Reorganization, then these two decisions could not have been reached had you not done what you just told us, sir. Like you said, stabilization will fail if this had not been done. And my compliments, like I said, this is massive work done. But now, sir, my request is, before the decision on stabilization is taken, someone in government must address these two issues. We need 4-star theater commanders so that backseat driving doesn't continue like it did for Andaman and Nicobar Command for 18 years till the CDS was appointed.
So, Ajay, you're right in your first observation that consensus may not provide a very optimal or very correct solution. Because somewhere you have to compromise. But when you're creating these structures, it is important to take people along. This is a basic fundamental because it will not work otherwise. If we try and force things, so it required a lot of review. When I took over, the earlier model for theater command was almost about 5 theater commands. The Northern Command being separate and Air Defense Command, they recruit all that. So whatever consensus we arrived, it's a good workable model. And this will work. And as I said, this is what we have thought because of our limited experience and knowledge. 90% of my life I have lived as an army officer. I would obviously look at things with an army perspective. So would an Air Force officer who is part of this committee, and so would be a naval officer. But 5 years down the line, when you have these theater commanders, they'll be able to look at these problems more objectively. Today also, after 3 years, a lot of issues get resolved because of this spirit of jointness and integration which I was speaking about, or change of narrative and awareness, which just, that's the hard work which we have put in. Another, which you said that one of the fundamentals, two things, regional commands and what will be the rank and appointment of the commander. I forgot to mention, in this whole exercise of creating theater command, that means creating new 3 theaters, headquarters, creating a joint headquarters, will require to the tune of, say, I'm not talking about theater commands, but below that, I don't remember now, almost about 40, 50, 20, 30 majors and 40, 50 brigadiers and say 200, 300 more colonels or select ranks. Select ranks themselves are 400. Where are we going to get this people from? This all is being gone through optimization amongst us and restructuring of our headquarters and delayering. These are the 3 concepts we're doing. In my view, all service headquarters and command headquarters are all overstaffed. That is largely to, if we can speak in this gathering, to address the ABC within. So they're all overstaffed. We can use those senior appointments which are underworked right now to create this new structure. And that's what we're trying to do. We are not wanting a single man from, we should not be asking a single man, let this go to senior, the senior rank. So that's a concept. So we will be able to do all this, and not only this, when I say that I'm going to expand DSA or DCYA, create a geospatial agency or more structures, all these structures we are trying to find within our own system and not asking for additional manpower for the government. If I think if we do this, we will be doing give us a better service actually to the services. That means they become far more efficient. Right now, the decision making process is 5 or 6 times, which is not there in the rest of the government. This is a thing which I learned at secretary. That my decision with my GS and DS are 2 levels for me. That's how we function. But in army headquarters, a file to read to chief, I think after 6 months on a smallest of things, because it will go through so many layers of a colonel to a brigadier. You are following a command structure in staff, which is actually designed for fighting a war. You can have a brigadier, you can have a colonel commanding a unit brigade to fight, but not for staff work. You can bypass channels. So we are trying to do all this in this structure. We already have a, we're not calling it an implementation cell. RM is already authorized, we're calling it a research cell. It helps me how to reorganize this manpower, the little nitty-gritties, etc. So we'll also optimize some command headquarters so that even senior ranks are able to get. Infrastructure will get optimized. When we create this, we'll create in existing places so that we don't ask for again some kind of command headquarters. Data command would be huge headquarters. We don't want a huge headquarters. Infrastructure. We try and optimize it.
Thank you very much. There is one excellent. Thank you. There is one excellent briefing that's always. Two questions. I'm sorry. Just one. They're going to be very straight line questions. First of all, is any study done of the Chinese mechanization of leading the air data commands, and especially the performance between Goklam in 2017 and Galwan in 2010? And what lessons have you learned from the Chinese mechanization of air command? That's one. The second is, have you integrated the civilian intelligence agency? Because as the former chief of the RMAW, 60% of our intelligence is meant for the armed forces. And I think at some stage, the integration or involving them, they may have to change their methodology. Last very simple question again, somebody has already raised about R&D. I am glad that the Secretary DRDO is also here, telling DRDO. Procurement. Is blindness coming in procurement? Because I don't see it from outside. I'm being frank, I'm no longer between over a year since I left the government. But I do sort of hear that there are procurement still continues to be on individual. Thank you.
I'll address this last part first. So earlier, services used to make their long-term capability development plan, which is known as NTIP. So IDS used to integrate it, and that was just a compilation. We have working on a different model now, integrated capability development plan, which is based on objectives, missions, roles, etc., and to carry out those missions, what kind of a capability you require. That's agnostic of a service. Once we decide platform, then we get distributed. So it's a different approach, and the JCC which is to be held, the first draft of this will be circulated to everybody. All procurements which are of joint or two service or tri-service nature. Suppose you're procuring UAVs, you're procuring satellite imagery, or anything which is, or helicopters, or such kind of systems are undergone through rigorous OSA studies to get us the right number. And this has happened, and this has helped cut down costs, cut down numbers actually. So this we are doing for all OSA studies are being done. So scientifically, you are trying to get to the optimal number of a capability which will be required to carry out a particular task. So this is as far as integration amongst the procurement participants. Procurement is also part of that integration. So one of the things which I'm supposed to do. As far as looking at the models for the theater commands, Chinese models, we had not only Chinese, we had looked at every kind of model, British, Australian, US, and French model also, including the Chinese model. So Chinese model is based on, I may say, even the sequencing was slightly different. They created this in 2015 and they had to carry out some changes in 2024-25. The first change that they had to do. Instead of creating theater commands first, they created joint SF, logistic force first. And yeah, so they followed a different sequence. We are following a different sequence. So we create theater commands and then integrate logistics. I did mention to you about inventory and all. That is part of this integration of logistics only. We have this joint logistics stations, joint inventory. So we're doing this parallelly rather than sequentially. We could have done this logistic first like the Chinese and then gone on to theater command. But we're trying because we're already behind in this reform process. So we need to do things parallelly. Civil and agencies surely will be part of this joint intelligence structure which we create at the DOCC. And it's not only sir, integration with the civilian which is in tomorrow's warfare, you may find uh, some capabilities which are intrinsically better in civil, like space, in cyber. They have to form part of your structures in future. So that realization is there among the services. And whenever we are creating or recommending new structures for the cyber or for even perception management, like perception management, we want a large number of media specialists and psychologists to be part of that. So we are including that. So there will be non-uniform guys part of this fighting in new domains for in future. So that we are looking at that.
Then Rakesh Sharma.
So excellent talk, sir. And I'm proud of the regiment you come from.
I have to do this.
Okay. My question relates to see the United States and the Allied people tried theater command in Second World War. It created one in 1987 and came out with the multi-domain operations in 2015 or 2017. The Chinese created theater command in 2015 and came up with the multi-domain precision warfare in 2021. We haven't created the theaters, we have gone the converse way. We want to talk about multi-domain warfare even before we start talking theaters. So we are fighting a different methodology of doing it. And do you feel that you can have multi-domain operations without having integrations? Or I hope we are not hastening the issue of multi-domain operations. And the issue is that why are we not talking about multi-capability operations? If you say that there is battlefield transparency as a capability, it is agnostic of whichever service or whichever department it comes from. It belongs to everybody else. But we don't talk about multi-capability. Multi-domain seems to be a little hasty. And I end by saying it has become so jargonized the way we are talking about multi-domain. You hear the 1.5 hours of 1.5 days of ransomware. Every known American jargon has been used in a slide there. It was so jargonized that we sitting at home with a whiskey couldn't understand a word what was being said.
So actually, you made my job easier by telling me that Americans started this long back and Chinese started in 15. It just goes to show that we are late. And to catch up, we need to do things parallelly. So that's why I've been saying that we are trying to attempt things parallelly. When we talk about multi-domain operations, this may be the first doctrine on multi-domain. There had to be a concept of this which had to be brought in officers at the middle level and junior level. They must understand this. Okay, what is this we are talking about? It's maybe at the initial stages, as a concept. It has to come down if we need to create this data command. This is not the final and only doctrine. This doctrine is multi-domain operation 1.0, there will be 2.0 here. After say about 2 years or 1 year, whatever we get, we'll put, there is a doctrine on joint ISR, joint targeting which I just made mention. So, parallelly we go to keep working, and that's how we would do it. We'll study your idea of multi-capabilities, which I have heard for the first time. We'll take it forward, provided you give us some kind of an input. Uh, well, I have tried in my opinion, in my little ways, you know, try to create our own words rather than using things from the Americans. I will say only three revolution will be affected, nothing else. The convergence warfare, the third revolution will be affected. You won't find it in Western literature. And now, at least we all Indians, we talk that third revolution will be affected convergence. It converges many capabilities. You will not find it in Western literature. It's the original concept. Today we talk about cognitive pluralism and we talk about perception management. You won't find this term from Western literature. That means physical pluralism, economic pluralism, and cognitive. Because in this world of AI, tomorrow you may, as all these organizations, the precursors to actual colonization. So again, it's a mix of both that we are trying. We can't say that they got everything of Western literature and develop everything our own. It's not possible. We have to come at this particular level where we'll be able to develop our own concept. But initially, we'll have to look at what the other people are saying. It has to be a mix of both.
Thank you for that, sir. Sir, gentle reminder, we are streaming live.
Yes, sir. Lieutenant Colonel Ankur, sir, I am given HR. So presently, each service is having its
He's also level here.
So presently, each service is having its own dedicated training command, sir, aligned to its respective charter. In context of theaterization, how is training planned, sir, to be structured? Is it through a dedicated unified training command, or each ITC will establish its own training establishment based on the threat primacy?
Good, Ankur. He was my ADC when I was the post commander. So it's a direct question. One of the first things which we tried to address when the Chief of Staff Committee met for operational theatre command, we looked at this problem. Can we look at joint training command first? Because we have three training commands. We debated this over months. Finally, we came to this conclusion: no, because each service has to train its own people. That has to be there. And for that efficiency in that, we have created structures, financial powers, etc. are vested. So to demolish that and create one would be counterproductive. Where we require joint training is at mid-level officers and above, where concepts are to be developed. So we are looking at joint training at a different level. So that's why this training commands of each service there is a name, and this is what the conclusion which we all arrived at. This is one of the first decisions which we took at among the Chief of Staff Committee 3 years back. So this is where we are. We have joint training institutions, number of them that we carry out. There is a requirement of more joint training at the level of 12 in higher command forces, more than what we can do at low time. So we create some structures for that, but we are not trying to amalgamate these training commands as of now.
Thank you very much, sir, and thank you for those very candid and open views. We now move forward to the next part after the discussions. After all, we are a think tank, and after all the thinking, we need to put some tanks out. Because think tank means publications, because those are our vehicles which will last, which will move out and spread the word. Though we moved on to the IT age and we are now on the website, and even as our current proceedings are being streamed live. So thank you very much for your very open and candid views for the Q&A section, sir. We move to the publications now.
Moving forward with the proceedings, may I request the Chief of Defence Staff to kindly release the USI book. There are a total of 5 books to be released today. The first book is USI Strategic Yearbook 2026. I will request the publisher and the author to be on stage for the release of the book. Earthshastra for the AI Age, a Chanakyan blueprint for India's technological sovereignty by Commander V. Srivastava, retired. Dual-use infrastructure in India, civil military fusion for strategic infrastructure development by Colonel Vijay Kumar Goyal. Cracks in the Crescent, an appraisal of Pakistan's enduring fault lines by Brigadier Suraj Chambyal, Sena Medal. The algorithm of war: code, compute, conquer. Insights for the Indian Army's next leap by Brigadier Manish Parthasarathi, Visit Seva Medal. I will now request DG USI to please present USI Memento to the Honorable Guest. May I now request Major General R.S. Yadav, Vishesh Seva Medal, retired, Director Center for Strategic Studies and Simulation, for the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. The CDS, the Chief of the Air Staff, other dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen. You all have heard the CDS speaking out. I've heard him a number of times over the last 3 years at USI and various other forums. You would all agree that the task which was entrusted to him appeared very similar to the people in uniform, that one order and then let's have a change. But I think having heard him, having heard various other people, it only goes to prove that it is a humongous task and it requires a lot of deliberation, which have been gone through, and let's see it fructifying as soon as possible because that is the need of the country. So I think on behalf of VG, I'd like to thank the CBS for finding time to address all of us and all of you to really come here and listen it out. I think I'd also like to mention one more thing on my personal thing, that I'm also a beneficiary of young Samir Sinha's legacy because Brigadier Deepak Sinha was my Colonel GS in 7th F when I was a Jeevan Ops, and he has mentored so that I could achieve what I have in my service career. And the last point that the audience needs to take a note, that the USI works with their fellowships officers in a very different way. Three of the books which have been released have been the work of USI, and almost about 6 or 7 more are under publication, which will be released by the end of the year. So with these words, may I once again thank the CES on behalf of all of us to enlighten us, and uh, that's all for the day. Thank you. Jai.
All are requested to kindly remain seated till the chief guest leaves the auditorium. Go ahead.